today to this panel, which is on data and cybersecurity, fighting the breaches. Just to let you know that this is an interactive session. So if you go onto the app and you go into the agenda and you click onto the title of this session, you will then be able to submit your questions and I'll be able to pick them up here online on my device here. We'll be taking questions at the end after the speakers have spoken. So thank you very much, Elisabetta, for that introduction. I'm Desne Masie, and I'll be moderating this panel. With me on the panel today are some experts in data and security, Peter Radcliffe, John Davies, Ian Howard, Rose, and Elisabetta. So today at Innovate Finance, you would have heard a lot about all kinds of financial technologies, from AI to open banking to wealth tech and payments. All of these things, just getting my panel to sort themselves out.
Don't be nervous, guys.
Yeah, and all of these things depend on data. I mean, I'm sure you've heard the phrase. I don't want to repeat it because I'll sound a bit, cheesy, but data's the new oil. It's extremely valuable. And I think, many of the technologies that you would have heard today, I mean, AI functions very much on data, so does open banking. But the thing is that as consumers are becoming more and more aware of the value of their data and how their data is used, I think people are becoming more and more concerned about the analysis as well as the online footprints that they leave behind. So at the moment, you will have also noticed that a lot of countries worldwide are, issuing data privacy laws almost on a daily basis, especially with AI frameworks. On this, the EU was the first mover with GDPR. And the long arm of GDPR is going into all countries' frameworks from Asia-Pac, Sub-Saharan Africa, and the Americas. And what we're seeing more and more is that people are organizing their national frameworks alongside GDPR. And what is interesting is that there's so many cyber attacks as well, not just on the individuals, but also on companies. Banks, for example, get hundreds of thousands of attacks on a daily basis. So this is really an area where, everybody's trying to get their hands on data for good and bad reasons. And despite this, the FTSE 100 recently did a survey of their directors and found that less than 20% of CEOs and board members had a cyber risk plan in place or knew, how to stop these issues. And the thing is that the problems really do begin with the staff members and your people and practices and so on. But I won't carry on too much. I'm, just asking the questions and framing the issues today. With me are some people who are way more knowledgeable in this, and I will hand over to them to explain to you a bit more the issues. On one level, there's the macro use of data, kind of the big sort of issues in terms of, the systemic risks to the financial system, to individual rights and privacy. And, Peter and Elisabetta will take us through that. And then, of course, there's the micro issues, which are the more pragmatic day-to-day things. What can we do as individuals and companies in terms of protecting ourselves and thinking ahead? And Rose and Ian will take us through that. And then John will finish off, discussing money laundering and how companies and individuals can think about that as well. So over to you, Elisabetta.
Good afternoon to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, and hopefully I will share something of value for you. So last week, I had the pleasure to attend the Cyber UK 2019, which probably most of you know is a flagship UK government event on cybersecurity and is organized by the National Cybersecurity Centre. And there are two statements made by the leader of actually GCHQ and the NCSC that I would like to share with you to introduce our view on the systemic level. So the head of GCHQ, Jeremy Fleming, during his keynote speech, pointed out the increasing importance of cooperation between government, academia, and industry to fight cybercrime. And on the same note, Kieran Martin, CEO of the NCSC, said cybersecurity is an international team sport when introducing 5 Eyes, which are the 5 international intelligence agencies we gathered for the first time in the UK at Cyber UK. So why are these top leaders and at the top of their game in securing this country from a cybersecurity perspective, speaking from an angle where they believe that multi-stakeholder cooperation and team work is so important for cybersecurity? Well, we come from a past where the digital environments were not as complex as they are today. So the most common approach was to focus on protecting the perimeter of your own organization, if at all. With the increasing use of digital technologies in government, public sector, and businesses and society, and the growing connectivity, we're all the time on our phones, as we all know, 24/7. So the connectivity of everything, the global digital environments have increased in complexity, posing greater challenges on how to secure the global digital space. Whether we like it or not, how to secure and regulate the global digital environment, and as a result, the technologies that bring it to life, can be an afterthought. And it requires new models. And this is, as I said, because we come from a very different environment, which was much simpler. So what should be these new models? And especially if we speak about financial services in general and FinTech, which is revolutionizing financial services, we need to remember that it's critical national infrastructure we are talking about. And so I want to give you an example. I don't know how many of you are familiar with war studies, but to take cyber risk to an extreme, which I think applies very well to critical infrastructure. So if I take the cyber risk to extreme expression, we speak about blended attacks in war studies. Blended attacks stands for a mixture between cyber attack and normal traditional warfare. By this, what I mean is that a hostile country would first, for example, try to basically put a country on its knees by targeting the critical national infrastructure. And obviously, financial services is one of every country critical national infrastructure. So to bring back the topic I want to discuss, it's not sufficient to think cybersecurity within the perimeter of your own organization anymore. Data processing is now happening in complex business ecosystems. So each of you can think on a daily basis with how many different third parties you interact. So you interact with clients, you interact with suppliers, some of you interact with customers. So it's a very complex digital ecosystem. What I mean by digital ecosystem, there are many organizations that actually deliver something or interact for different reasons. And so we need to transcend, when we think about how to solve the cybersecurity issues, we need to transcend the security perimeter of our own organization. So we need to make a step ahead. So we need to think differently from the past. And believe me or not, most of organizations still consider risk a problem within their own security organization perimeter. So we know that innovation is booming in financial services. I think this week is a testimony of it. And every day we see new technologies coming to the market. So I will tackle 3 main topics. I will tackle, obviously, cybersecurity, so how securing data. I will speak about interoperability and how this relates to securing data. And I will also speak about auditability to tackle what our host of the panel said, which is GDPR, which I think each and all of you had substantial headaches in this regard. So starting from security. For those that are familiar with the term standards, okay, so namely the rules that either a group of an industry group or an entire industry look at agreeing to make sure specific products coming to market build in a specific way. So for example, all your washing machine had to go through this process to speak about something that is not necessarily related to FinTech, but is quite easy to understand, okay? So a washing machine, before going into your flat, is built in a very specific way so that it doesn't cause all sorts of health and safety issues, for example. The interesting thing, although we all appreciate, after what I said, that there is a massive potential systemic risk at stake which can affect our lives, our economies, and our nations, actually, and I attend these forums on a yearly basis, cybersecurity standards for technology products across industries are either inexistent or they are catching up. So the products keep to be pushed in the market, but there are no cybersecurity standards. And so do we need to rethink the topic of standards in relation to security, to cybersecurity? Should regulators, and in this case, in these forums, obviously financial services regulator, impose security by design, especially for technology products which target critical infrastructure industries like financial services? If we look at security by design, would also be probably much easier to secure the space without expecting so many organizations, and some are very small, to understand such a complex topic. So should we actually make a strong step ahead in looking at cybersecurity by design for every single security technology product, inclusive of FinTech? And then my next topic is interoperability by design. So interoperability, the simplest example of interoperability for those who are not familiar with this term would be, if I use Vodafone and you use Orange, one of you uses, we can call each other because they interoperate. So this is about networks. So if we look at securing data, because it's such a complex ecosystem of different parties interacting, and this data processing, which is a term from the GDPR, so anything you do really to a data can happen within your security perimeter or somewhere else, because you outsource some of your activities, or simply because you're interacting with your customers and many other entities. So do we need to transcend this concept too? So it's sufficient to think, okay, well, I'm going to secure very well data within the security perimeter of my organization. Well, the answer is no. It's not enough anymore. Do we actually also need to reevaluate the security consequences of mainstream vendor lock-in approach? Because at the moment, we either have to consider a world where an entire ecosystem of organizations that interact have to all use the same products of the same brand, or we have a substantial problem, because there will be always security gaps. Because as long as, for example...
I'm going to have to ask you to just finish up.
Yes, sorry. So this was about interoperability, and then I got very excited, I'm sorry. And then about auditability, which is to tackle what you said. So the GDPR brings along a very interesting new concept in relation to data privacy. So data privacy is a topic, very important one, and if you make a connection with cybersecurity, is usually about encryption. But the GDPR says something else. Says, okay, you have to secure data in every data processing activity, but then they also say, well, you, enterprise, have to also ensure you can access this data, no matter what technology you use to secure it, because if a European Union citizen asks you for that access, then you have to be able to do it. And so this gives you an overview of what I and the organization I represent believe is the future, and certain things we need to think about to make not just financial services, but the digital environments in general safer and raise the bar. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
Thank you,
Lots
Des.
there to respond to.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
okay.
No.
Actually, yeah.
Obviously, listening to the previous speaker as we just walked in, and obviously to us as well, by the end of this session, you will be totally paranoid about security and all the aspects of it. But let's just sort of start at the beginning. First of all, digital is going to deliver massive, massive benefits to us. It already is. It's on efficiency, greater insights into our life and predicting our behavior, and sort of value creation through bigger data. But the question I think that we need to be looking at is this revolution, or is it actually evolution? Now, my interest is payments, and over the last sort of 5 years, we've had huge increases in legislation, regulation, PSD2, open banking, and much more. And we have FinTech and we have RegTech. There are many new entrants into the industry with niche products and services, basically all through mobile apps. And this makes the procedure of buying something or sending money anywhere in the world infinitely easier and cheaper. So whether you are buying something or you are the merchant who's actually going to be receiving payment, you aren't really interested in actually how it happens. You only sort of care about what you are buying and what you will do with the money when it's received. You assume, however, that the money will arrive when it should. So we have, over the last few years, through open banking primarily, a new consumer-friendly payments method. And are developed, we must ensure, this is the big thing, that standards are not actually compromised. And one of the issues is that not all of the new players in this space have the will or necessarily the budgets to match the traditional players in security. And whilst the new providers of these payment services will sort of have to answer to their customers, their shareholders, and to their regulators on the security levels, my concern is focused on the number of access points to the payment infrastructure. Now, this infrastructure is as strong as the weakest link. Now, more connections that there are into the payment infrastructure leads to greater systemic risk. And the integrity of our payments infrastructure must be paramount above all else. So evolution, in my view, is better than revolution. Don't let's sort of turn this, the undoubted benefits of the Internet of Things particularly into a gold rush. Now, when we use artificial intelligence to help manage risk, and huge benefits coming from there, against fraud and cyber attack, we must remember that what is actually being created when machines are talking to each other, learning and creating their own solutions, independent of human intervention. Defender, and being in the payments world, as we've already mentioned, each payment company tends to see about 10 to 15,000 cyber attacks a day, and they're coming in all of the time. You can tell when a Chinese person maybe or somewhere else in the world has actually gone to lunch because their particular fingerprint is actually changing on the way they're actually trying to hack into it. But they're creating these solutions that if we don't know what's going on down there and allowing Defender and attacker AI, we're basically going down to the matrix. So let's make our systems too complex. And this is what I would like to sort of cheer on today. Clever or complex is the enemy of risk.
Thank you. Very short and sweet. I like that. So I think what's very interesting what you've said, Richard, you've just made me think about, I don't know if any of the speakers are planning to cover insurance, because besides from open banking payments, there's also telematics and Internet of Things, and increasingly wearables, our phones, and little data trails that we leave behind. Besides from the online, profiles that I know Rose and Ian are going to speak about, there's also, in order for free services, for Gmail, for my fitness tracker, you're leaving behind, an avatar of yourself all the time, which becomes increasingly valuable. And with Internet of Things, the complexities, you have AI and all of these machines talking to one another and analyzing data, and all of these completely unintended consequences. Now, I'm carrying on for too long. I'll hand over to Rose, who will take us through some of the pragmatic issues that individuals and companies can think about in regard to these issues.
Yes. Thank you. So yes, I'm going to speak a little bit more about some of the really micro issues that we're covering. Peter mentioned a couple of minutes ago that you will be totally paranoid when you leave this room, and I think it's my job to really instill that fear in you on a practical basis. So what I want to talk about is the extent of the data that we leave out there. And about 12 months ago, we in our company noticed that we were hearing more and more about exposed data. And this has about 3 real risks for companies. So there's a reputational risk. As we heard from the keynote speaker, nobody wants to be that first finance company who has the big data breach. It has a regulatory risk now with the GDPR. And we're also looking at a massive financial risk. So what is out there is of huge importance to the success of a company. And so what we did was we went away and we said to ourselves, how much data do we think we can get in 3 months? And I want to stress, we didn't look at the dark web. We didn't hack into anything. We didn't buy any data. We literally went out and looked at misconfigured servers, NAS drives, FTP servers. And in 3 months, we found 1.5 billion files. It's a lot. To put that another way, that's 12 trillion terabytes of data. It's 4,000 times more than the Panama Papers leak, is what we found out that in 3 months, without really looking very hard. I want to stress that. So we can talk about, perimeters and risk, but actually what we really have to think about is what are we putting out there? What are we leaving out there? And one of the themes that came out from this study was what we call ready-made reconnaissance. Because in this 1.5 billion files of data that we found out there, we found 70,000 payroll documents. We found about 70,000 tax returns. We found over 1 million healthcare records. And as an attacker, you can use those to commit insurance fraud, identity theft, medical fraud. It's all out there. You can use it to target an attack against a company because you have social media records. We found things like companies had penetration testing done. And we found that the pen testers had uploaded the results of this to a misconfigured NAS drive. So we immediately had all of the data that we would ever need to mount an attack against that company. And one of the, it was both funny and terrifying at the same time. So what kind of is key for us is being able to recognize what data we've got out there and actually what you can do about it, because we live in an age where data is the new oil. Data is cheap. We don't even think about it. How many of us think before we post something to Facebook or Twitter or Instagram? How many of our organizations think before we post things to Facebook or Twitter or Instagram? And in fact, we don't anymore because it's become an inconsequential action. And actually, it's not, because what we are doing is we are giving attackers or giving threat actors ways to understand our vulnerabilities. And so as a company and as a study, what we really found from this is we have to be aware of what we're putting out there. We have to be aware what's out there. We have to be aware what people can do with it. And we have to understand that there is a disparity between what we think of as nation-state threat actors. We think of data breaches as these very targeted attacks. We think somebody is coming for our data. And actually, they're not, because why would you? If you're a threat actor, why when it's out there already? Why would you risk being caught? Why would you risk having your signature discovered before you even got close to it, when you could just make do with actually finding what somebody had put out on a server? So I'm going to leave you with that thought to just really kind of let that sink in. Think about how much you've posted. Think about whether you've left any work files misconfigured. And kind of while you're contemplating that, I'm going to hand over to
Thanks.
Thanks so much, Rose. I must tell you, we're getting some very exciting audience questions here. I'll save it for later, but I think they're going to make you a bit paranoid. So, Ian.
Yeah, hi everyone. I guess I'm going to make you a little bit more paranoid again.
Sorry, I said that.
As a company, we've sort of gone beyond just checking people's data, checking databases to sort of do things such as onboarding of staff, onboarding of clients, looking at sort of management teams. We're looking at people's individual digital footprints to profile them, and all the data is publicly available. And I think to Rose's point, this is what we're trying to get out to people is people don't realise what's out there. Even those innocuous photos that you put out there tells a lot. So a single picture, we had one the other day. Somebody had posted a picture of their child going to school. Within that picture was the mother's details, the father's details, the details of the son, the details of his school. Within the metadata of the picture, there was their home address. So actually, to Rose's point, we don't need to go out and attack a firm in order to basically get access to that information. The information already exists in the public domain. And that's the thing that we sort of try and get across to people, is that you need to be much more aware of what's out there, because it's about you protecting your own footprint and therefore protecting the company's footprint, which will, in order to basically protect not just your own reputation, but also the vulnerabilities that basically sit within the company. So
Thank you very much. We're going to hand over to John now, who's going to talk about money laundering.
Very
He's got
profitable.
some slides.
Sure. Okay,
Sure.
so let's turn it around a little bit and see what we can do about it, shall we? So therefore, let's talk about corporate fraud, and let's talk about what we can and cannot do about that. So the first thing we have to accept in the world of fraud is that whatever people are using right now, it simply does not work. It just doesn't. So all good fraudsters know exactly how to get past all the systems, use all the best pieces of data, and just walk straight through into an account. No good fraudster ever gets stopped on KYC or KYB, which is quite frightening, really, isn't it? So therefore, here's a classic example. So therefore, there's a property over my left shoulder, so quite innocuous. So that property last year had the highest turnover per square foot of any retail business within the UK. It also had linked to it last year most number of people working to it per square foot in the UK. Now, I have been there. There's a double extension on the back. So that property, have a guess, the turnover out of that property last year, having passed all the KYC and AML checks, how much turnover do you think that property turned over? 1 million, 5, 10? Yeah, that's right, 7.4 billion. So 7.4 billion got turned over through that company last year. So how many companies then? 30, 40, 50, 100? That's right, yeah. 4,315. Every one of them banked in the UK. Every one of them used your systems. Every one of them used all the standard data sets to do so. Why? Because everybody goes to Companies House, first of all, to check the data. And anybody who knows anything about Companies House, and it's not their fault, they don't have a mandate to do anything different, the word is crap in, crap out. You can literally file anything you want, really, because nobody ever looks at it and says, that can't be right. So therefore, bit of a problem. Let's take the next slide for 1 second. I just in 2 slides, let's show the example. If you go to the next slide. So then, who's he?
CEO.
Yes, he is. So some people just don't know who he is. Yet this guy signed off how many sets of corporate accounts last year? That's right, 20,000. 23,000 actually. So 23,000 sets of accounts. What was the common fact between those accounts? They were all the same. So he is what we call an enabler, because guess where he lives? Not in the UK. Why wouldn't he live in the UK? Because he might be prosecuted. So he lives in Belgium. So by living in Belgium, who's going to prosecute him? No one is the answer. So therefore, he can sign off all those accounts, 20-odd thousand accounts. So is he a professional accountant? No, he's a professional dentist. No one's picked anything like this whatsoever, not at all. And thereby lies the problem, which is because when we're using the naked eye, we have no idea what we're dealing with. We just can't see what's sitting in front of us. So therefore, what we've looked at, and I think Nick Cook from the FCA said this morning, we have to start looking at typology. So what looks bad? So therefore, what we set about as Comply was completely rebuilding UK Companies House. So therefore, we completely rebuilt it since 1989, took every single corporate, every director, every UBO, every PSC, connected all of them together, then connected all the services addressed together, and then risk profiled every single corporate, director, UBO, and PSC. So now we're able to say, that's interesting, because that company you thought was quite normal will tell you, actually, the PSC is overseas. Not only overseas, they're in somewhere which is high risk. They're in the Caribbean or similar. So therefore you think, okay, it doesn't affect us, but at least we know about that. But the key is telling you what the problems are. So every week there are 9,500 new UK companies formed. Almost 20% of them have something that's not right. When we went through the figures, nearly 500,000 companies have something absolutely wrong with them. Not 500,000 directors. Oh, no, 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 no. So therefore, we have one lady, to be fair to her, she's been a professional. She's been a director for some years. She's now a director of 7,000 something 200 companies, and she's 102. Her daughter surpasses her because she's 82, and she's got 9,000 companies she's a nominated director of. Now, from your point, I'm not saying for 1 second they've done something wrong, but if you were about to onboard that customer, what would you think? You'd think, nothing wrong with them whatsoever. So, and these are the key problems, because they all get past the systems, and that's why there's been a change. Now, you can only make those changes. The only way we could do all that data, now we talk about data with up to 3 terabytes of data, which apparently is a lot, allegedly. You have to fill the room. Anyway, now the key thing here with that amount of data is that no human could ever analyze it. You can never link it all together. So it's the technology allows you to do that, but you've got to have the people as well who've lived through that. Now, Peter and myself met for the first time today. We're both from Swansea. Peter's from the posh part of Swansea, which is by the beach now. I'm from the wrong side of Swansea, because all of my mates did those things. And that's the key. You have to know how these people think and behave. And the trouble is, most people don't. They have no idea. You know, one of the chaps I know was sent down for printing money. He only got caught because he kept the printing running all night, and the neighbours complained. So, this is true. So at the end, no, but the key thing is that's what you're looking for. You have to understand typology. What looks like? What looks bad? That kind of looks bad, you know. So why wouldn't there be 100 copies above a kebab shop in Clapham? Why would they be? There's no commercial reason to do so. But right now, nobody can tell you. And that's the problem we sought to put about, is to start telling you to do that. Now also, just very quickly, I'm also the Deputy Chair.
Going to put you to time.
I will go as fast as I can, of the Emerging Payments Association, which is all things to do with rails and cards, because payment cards, banking systems. And actually, at last, as I said, we're actually putting together a collaborative approach to trying to prevent this, where people actually do share information about corrupt regimes, corrupt people, and that's why we want to talk to you as well, is because that's what we need to do. We actually need to joining up the dots and helping each other. And again, to be fair to Neotas, some very, very clever stuff. I mean, it's just genuinely clever, which helps in trying to identify who these people are. Why would anybody go to the GHEV or whatever is the main thing for on the black hat piece? Black hat is all the hackers go. If somebody's going there, why is he going there? Because he got lost, or because he might be interested in actually hacking your business? So there you go.
I'm glad John ended the way he did there, because I was beginning to wonder what kind of tips is he giving us here. Anyway, all above board. So I'm going to direct this first question from Michael Gaston to Elisabetta, but of course, if any of the others have a comment as well, you can of course contribute. With billions of passwords exposed and rapid advances in deep learning and natural language processing, do we need to consider a new approach to passwords regarding the creation, use, and storage? I think you know I'm asking you that about the cryptography.
I think cyber risk is evolving every day, and so whatever is in place has to evolve. So I think the biggest challenge that we are going to face in the next 10 years is the birth of post-quantum computers, which will basically challenge all the cryptography we know today. And they will be able to break the current cryptography, which is the most common way of protecting data, much faster. And so the next challenge for cybersecurity professionals that deal with cryptography is how should cryptography look like going forward to deal with post-quantum computers. You probably know that for financial services, post-quantum is very good news, because post-quantum computing will be able to do things that we cannot do today. But at the same time, as all industries that have to save data for a very long time, obviously strong cryptography, also looking back, needs to be accounted for.
Yeah, I mean, tomorrow there's going to be a cryptocurrency and DLT session, but I mean, I think something that I find quite fascinating about the whole crypto assets world is that in order to put your keys into cold storage, you have to like write them out onto a piece of paper or put them into, you know, an analog format. So people are doing things like splitting the passwords, key sharding across, you know, putting them in Swiss mountain vaults. You know, I think it's quite interesting as, you know, the digital world becomes more complex, how we still want that sort of tangible proof, and that's the thing. Passwords also becoming like an asset in, you know, a very valuable way. Does anybody else have anything to say about passwords?
I spoke to my mother quite recently.
Yeah.
Bless her, living her best life. And I had spoken to her quite harshly about 6 months ago, because I found out that she used the same password for everything.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Not quite, but it was like my name and my birthday, and I was like, Mum, we need to discuss this. And so when I spoke to her a little while ago, she said, no, I'm getting much better now. Look, and she took out a little book and showed me all of the place, like she'd written down the site and then the password for that site next to it. And I was like, okay, we're doing this now, are we? But it's that really interesting feel that we need to have something to hang on to, and whether it's a physical password or a physical key, actually, I think that is going to have to be something that we build into whatever solution comes next. So we think about, we still do it with fingerprints now and face recognition.
And microchipping, and then, you know, this, yeah.
It went wrong, really.
Biohacking gone wrong over here. Don't try this at home, people. We've got about 4 minutes, and I just want to do we've got a few more questions. So somebody's been reading Susanna Zuboff. Yale Simon is asking us about surveillance capitalism. This is a very, very big question. I mean, I'm happy to take this because I'm sort of obsessed with that book at the moment. You know, and really, I think what she was saying in surveillance capitalism is that, you know, the big tech companies were just first movers. They recognized 10 years ago that data was going to become valuable, and they just took it. They took it without us asking. You know, it's and she draws you know, some very interesting parallels to that. And you know, we sort of, and this is the thing, we're all sort of perfectly happy to get free services like Gmail and Facebook and LinkedIn, but they're not really free. If you think about, I mean, if anyone's watched The Social Network, remember Zuckerberg said there, I don't understand why people are just handing over all of this information. You know, the tech companies saw that first, but they're now so far ahead. They've got a decade's worth of terabytes and terabytes and terabytes of information, which I mean, you know, the thing is, of course we want to, because we had the gentleman, Robert Harrigan from GCHQ here previously. And I think the thing is, you know, as consumers, we want to believe that governments and companies will do the right thing, you know, with our data. But I mean, increasingly, I mean, you know, you think about facial recognition. And of course, all of this is fine. You know, and people are always like, well, there's nothing to be afraid of if, you know, you're not doing anything wrong. But of course, what if you're a whistleblower against a state or a corporation? You know, I think these things are, you know, a bit Orwellian, but I'll just stop there. I don't know.
I just think there's a couple of points here. I think there is, obviously, these tech companies are collecting a lot of data. And we all sign up to those terms and conditions, and we don't really have a lot of choice to what nobody reads them. We don't really have a lot of choice if we want the service in terms of what we're doing. But actually, it's also incumbent upon us, because we're the ones that are putting the data out there. So we're the ones that are basically sharing that data with the third parties. I mean, again, when we look at what we do, there's not a single person in this room that we couldn't find a lot of data about and basically use that information in some sort of malicious intent if we so wanted to. So actually, whilst, you know, we talk about the companies and their responsibilities, I do think we have to really sort of start at home in terms of what we put out there, and it's really incumbent upon all of us as individuals to think about what we're sharing and who we're tagging and all that information that's out there, because actually, you know, we are the people that are creating the vulnerabilities. We are the ones that are really basically putting our personal reputations on the line and the company's sort of reputation and well-being online because of what we're posting.
I mean, it's the convenience of it all. And I mean, that actually leads into, you know, you want this product and service, you want it now. You're not going to think about, you know, the fact that you have to hand over this information in order to use the product or service and the consequences of that. And the next question actually leads into that concept, says, how do we move large companies beyond sending questionnaires to FinTech vendors and do meaningful assessments of data protection and ICT security of the potential partners? So that speaks to box ticking, I suppose. We have, somebody can comment on that in 30 seconds.
So how do we move away from box
How do we
ticking?
move away from, you know, how do we make it more meaningful?
Well, I think certainly you're seeing the regulators come in and
IT
talk
security.
about this. So you're definitely seeing the regulators talk more to, you know, not just relying on databases and stepping away from the box ticking exercises. You know, the regulators don't prescribe how to basically do things. They describe a set of principles. So again, it is incumbent upon us to engage in those principles and take it to the next level. And I think really, you know, when we talk about the banks, and I know we sort of want to embed it in the FinTech communities, but the banks themselves have got to sort of step up to the plate and realise that this whole exercise is no longer about box ticking. Certainly from an AML perspective, you know, it's the single biggest thing that the FCA is looking at. You know, less than 1% of all money laundering gets caught.
Yep.
I mean, it's a ridiculous number.
We have to stop
and
there.
I'm going to stop at that.
Okay, thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you.